Hello and welcome to episode 19 of the Crash and Ride podcast. I'm Patrick Ferguson. I'm your host. Today's guest is Ryley Walker. Ryley is a guitar player, songwriter, originally from Rockford, Illinois, lived in Chicago for many years, and is now living in Queens, New York. Ryley has a huge Twitter presence. That's how he came to my attention. After following him on Twitter for a while, it sort of became apparent to me that he might be somebody I wanted to talk to. If this is your first Crash and Ride podcast, Crash and Ride is a long-form interview podcast where I talk to musicians who've survived anxiety, depression, and addiction. I'm a working musician myself. I play in several bands, including I work with Mike Mills from REM and his symphonic side project. We're going on a tour later this fall with Chuck Leavell, the keyboard player from the Rolling Stones and previously from the Allman Brothers. Also on that tour will be Bobby McDuffie, one of the world's premier concert violinists. I also play in the high-energy rock band Pinky Doodle Poodle. They're transplants to the United States from Tokyo. Here's some upcoming shows with them. Friday, July 19th, we're playing Slopfest in Athens, Georgia at a bar called Little Kings. Slopfest is a multi-day festival of punk and garage punk and noise rock bands that play at this one bar, Little Kings in Athens. If you're within driving distance of Athens, Georgia, and you like noisy music, man, that's a great thing to come see. Highly recommend it. The next day we're playing, and that's July 20th, we're playing the Art Bar in Columbia, South Carolina. Then we're going to take a little break. We'll have some shows in early August. I'll have more info about that as it gets closer. Hey, here's some big news. If you follow Crash and Ride at all on social media or you're a regular listener, you'll know that I've been talking about this grant that was being awarded by the Swedish record label Record Union. They started a foundation called 73%.com to combat mental health issues in musicians. There was a study that came out that revealed that 73% of musicians have struggled with anxiety and depression through the course of living and pursuing their art. They had an open call for submissions, and Crash and Ride got nominated and won a $5,000 grant, which, man, thank you everybody who helped out with that. Thank you everybody who voted. Thank you to everybody who continues to listen to this program. It's been a wild summer, and I'm super grateful to everybody who's helped out. I also want to thank everybody who's opened their hearts and opened their homes to the various bands I've been touring with the last few months. I've stayed on a lot of couches, and a lot of people have been super kind. Every band travels on the kindness of strangers at some level or another, and people have been really awesome and incredible, especially to Pinky Doodle Poodle. You know, they're here on a limited visa, and we're going to try to renew that and get them another year in the States. But part of that is saving up the money to pay for that process, and not getting hotel rooms and being able to crash in people's homes has been a big step. So thank you so much for that. I have a couple of quick announcements. If you're struggling with depression and anxiety and thoughts of self-harm, I would encourage you to call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. I promote that at the beginning and end of every podcast because I know it saves some lives. It's 24/7, it's free, it's confidential, it's staffed by trained volunteers to help you through your crisis. 1-800-273-8255. It's a really extraordinary organization. I'm not in any way affiliated with them, but I'm going to promote them at every opportunity because I think they do such remarkable work. 1-800-273-8255. Also, last week I discovered the Trans Lifeline's peer support line. If you're a trans person and you're struggling with anxiety, depression, dysphoria, you need somebody to talk to. 1-877-565-8860. Reach out. There's a trans person who's probably had some of the same feelings that you're having, and they can probably help. 1-877-565-8860. Also, Crash and Ride is brought to you in part by Greer Amplification. Greer Amps builds the best boutique effects pedals available. If you're looking for an overdrive, boost, fuzz, compressor, or tremolo that is rugged, road-tested, and at home on stage, in the studio, or in your living room, Greer has a pedal for you. Nick and his staff strive to build the best products around with the best tone you've ever heard. They believe in their products, and they stand behind them too, backing each one up with a lifetime warranty to the original owner. Each Greer Amps product is hand-built in Athens, Georgia, USA. Go to www.greeramps.com or visit your favorite music retailer today. Crash and Ride is also brought to you in part by Jittery Joe's, a local coffee roaster in Athens, Georgia. They've created an espresso blend named after the podcast. You can get Crash and Ride Espresso on their web store. It will soon be available on our web store as soon as I build that web store, which I'm working on, I promise. You can also go to our Patreon page at www.patreon.com/crashandride, and you can sign up for a $35 a month sponsorship, which means I send you a can of beans every month, and you can drink my favorite espresso, and you also support the show. If you hear kind of a weird sound here, my dog is lying next to me snoring. I know that's a weird sound, and I'm sorry. That's all the announcements I have. I want to give you a little background on this interview with Ryley Walker. We had a couple of false starts where I tried to schedule interviews, and for one reason or another, he had to cancel or I had to cancel. It took us a couple of days to get on the same page. I did this interview over Skype, so the audio quality is a little iffy sometimes, but I was sitting in my living room where my little studio is outside of Athens, Georgia, in the country, and he's in his apartment in Queens with all the windows open, and you can hear the city happening around him. I love those sounds. I find it kind of soothing, even though I wasn't really cut out for urban life the one time I tried it. But I think initially that Ryley was like, who is this stranger who wants to ask me these incredibly personal questions? But as the interview went on, we kind of settled in, and I feel like he began to realize that I'm just a huge music fan and that the mission of the podcast is sincere and an important one. And he gave it 110%. He went deep. I'm really kind of amazed at the level of honesty he's capable of so early in his sobriety, and I'm really grateful that he was able to do this. So all that said, let's jump into our interview with Ryley Walker. Ryley Walker, a guitar player, songwriter, absolutely huge Twitter presence, and generally thoughtful guy. Hi, Ryley.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm good, man. Where are you now?
I'm in Ridgewood, Queens, New York City. I live here.
You've moved to Queens from Chicago?
Yeah, I lived in Chicago until last year, and then I made the big move over here.
Mm-hmm. I saw an interview from about this time last year where you were talking about living near a bodega. Was that in Chicago, or was that in your new neighborhood?
In Chicago, I moved. Yeah, I was in Chicago 11 years, and the last year I was there, like all of 2017 and 18, I lived on the far south side in Englewood. Mm-hmm. And it was just kind of a desolate neighborhood, but that was a great year. It was kind of nice to be away from all the brunch and shit.
The brunch is brunch sort of a signifier for you of sort of encroaching white gentrification?
I mean, I'm not against any sort of poached egg on a bed of greens, but I think it just becomes nauseating when it's just kind of omnipresent in my fucking reality, you know?
Yeah. I was just in Nashville last weekend and was lamenting the $2.50 donut as the sign of the onrushing tide of relentless gentrification.
Well, you know, somebody's got to put Fruity Pebbles in a jelly donut and upcharge you.
Yeah, I was. My comment was, "Welcome to Nashville. That iced coffee will be $6, and your lift was here 30 seconds before you called it."
Yeah, you know, Nashville's got that all on dial. It's a big service industry city. A lot of chicken picking and chicken and for brunch, you know.
Yeah, I don't. You know, it's neither a good thing or a bad thing, but it's definitely a thing.
Yeah. But yeah, I moved to New York last fall. I'm pretty glad to be here. I was in Illinois my entire life, so
you're from Rockford. You're from Rockford originally, right?
Yeah, I'm from Rockford originally. I was born and raised there, but moved to Chicago when I was 18.
So is Cheap Trick from Rockford? Am I making that up in my head, or?
You are not making that up. Cheap Trick is Rockford, Illinois' hometown pride. They're a great band. I love them.
Have you heard the Albini sessions for In Color?
Yeah, they're incredible. I think it's funny you wouldn't really put those two bands together, but Steve Albini really made them sound so huge. You know, Cheap Trick to me is like a big Abbey Road recording. You know,
right?
Grandiose, full spectrum sort of album band where you can kind of hear this huge stadium rock sound. But Steve Albini did a great job with them, I think.
Yeah, I know that Steve's not happy that someone who'd worked at the studio leaked a cassette dub of that record, but man, every time I listen to it, I think this is so great. The drum sounds are so great, and it makes a huge difference on songs like Southern Girls.
Yeah, Bunny Carlos is kind of the secret ingredient to that band. He's no longer in the band, but you know, that's life and money and contracts, I guess.
I mean, I'm a huge drum nerd, and so you know he looms really large in the like vintage drum collector world with like his huge collection of vintage Ludwigs, and sort of he's many times the sort of last word on this is a good drum, this is not a good drum.
No, yeah, Bunny's amazing. I remember when I was a kid, I had a friend who played drums and his like snare broke or something, like a piece of shit snare, beginner snare. And we knew where Bunny Carlos lives. So we just like went and knocked on his door. We're like, "Can you fix this?" And he's like, "No." And I'm not gonna fix your snare for you right now. It's like I have a life and a mortgage. What do you know? Yeah, that was pretty funny. But yeah, I growing up in Rockford, Cheap Trick was always kind of like touted as the ones who made it and got out. And they're a great band. When I was younger, I didn't really, I knew Dream Police and all the big songs. But, it wasn't until I was a bit older where I got into the deep cuts. I'm like, oh, this is actually one of the great rock bands and not just a band that everybody says is from my hometown, you see them around, you'd be at the grocery store or something, and you'd be like, oh, there's Robin Zander or whatever. And as far as I know, all of them still live there or around there. So, they're lifers, and they're such a great band.
It's funny. So your story about taking a broken, probably Chinese-made snare drum to Bunny Carlos's house now forms a perfect trilogy with my disappointing encounters of people going to celebrities' houses. There's the Steve Earle story about going to William Burroughs' house in Lawrence, Kansas, and almost immediately being arrested for trespassing. And then I play with Mike Mills from REM in another band, and he has a story about going to Greg Allman's house. And maybe one day he can go public with that, but it was kind of not the sort of religious experience he was expecting or hoping for.
Yeah, I mean, Mike Mills is such a talented big dude. You'd think that he could kind of just wedge his way in, but
he was a teenager. This was when he was just a kid. This is very similar to going to Bunny Carlos's house with a broken snare. Like he was just in the neighborhood in Macon. They all grew up in Macon, so
that's amazing.
So I'm looking at, I have some notes here. I count 5 studio albums and 3 EPs. You've been really prolific.
Yeah, there's a lot of music out there.
Where are you at right now? Are you working on a record or touring on a record or just taking a break?
No, I'm taking a nice big break. There's playing some shows here and there just to kind of keep the lights on, but 2019 is the first year where I've been home more than I've been on the road, or I'm pretty happy to not be busy right now.
Yeah.
I mean, shit is tight. I'm kind of scrambling to pay rent right now and stuff, but it's like it's a good feeling, honestly, man. My brain needed a little reset, so I'm definitely laying low right now. Don't really have any new songs or anything. I'm just kind of taking everything as it comes instead of forcing it.
So I kind of have a nerdy question about, like, I've been sort of checking out a lot of your material on YouTube and stuff, and it seems like your tuning is really similar to Richard Thompson's. Am I crazy, or is that something?
Yeah, I love Richard Thompson and obviously Fairport Convention.
Right.
I think, he uses a lot of open slack tunings, and he was definitely a big early influence as far as like bending and sort of hammer-ons and pull-offs.
Yeah.
I think I do that a lot. I do a lot of sort of out bends and hammer-ons and stuff. And he was a huge influence for that, and I definitely took a lot from the records he did with Linda Thompson and Fairport, like Unhappy Ricky and stuff like that. I love those records.
Have you ever spent any time with the Small Town Romance record? That's a solo show that he did, I don't know, 20-something years ago.
Small Town Romance?
Yeah, it was like a live recording from a pub somewhere. It carried me through one of the sort of rough emotional patches in my life. I spent about a year just struggling to get out of bed, and I think that record was on repeat pretty much the whole time.
Wow, I don't think I've heard that. I gotta check it out.
Man, it's so good. You really get to, like, without a band kind of in the way, you can really hear some of the intricacy of the guitar work, and it's just outstanding.
Yeah, he's brilliant. He uses so much space in his soloing and in his chords and stuff like that. He's a real genius. I got to tour with him earlier this year. It was awesome.
How was that?
It was, well, God, that tour is part of my story. But as far as Richard Thompson, he's really professional and friendly and cordial, and he's great every night.
Was Michael playing drums for him?
Yeah, he was. It was a great band.
That's a friend of mine. He's a really cool guy.
Really, really cool guy.
I'm probably going to see him pretty soon. I'm about to go out on the road with this Japanese rock band I play with, Pinky Doodle Poodle, which is the most Japanese rock band name of all time, I think.
I would say so. It's a good band.
I think it's like a pretty staunch Gen Xer. There's a part of me that's like, oh God, that's just not a great band name. But everybody I mentioned it to is like, no, I love that name.
No, it's beautiful, man.
Yeah, I interviewed Thor Harris last week, and I was re-listening to the interview, and I think that he and I are both kind of in this weird post-toxic masculinity Gen X place. And I think playing in a band called Pinky Doodle Poodle is almost like therapy for me to like just get the fuck over it.
Yeah, man, it'll keep you grounded.
Yeah. So you grew up in Rockford. When did you start playing guitar?
Right when I was like around 12 or 13. There was no big push for it or anything. Like, I didn't really come from a music family, just kind of a normal working class family, I guess.
What'd your dad and mom do?
My mom worked at a grocery store, and my dad worked at like a car factory. So very like Bruce Springsteen song sort of shit, you know?
Uh-huh.
Working against the man for the man sort of life.
Right.
And yeah, they're cool. And yeah, so I found guitar, I think, just through friends. And when I was younger, skateboarding got me more into music. You know, skateboarding and music go hand in hand so well. I
mean, a huge part of my childhood or adolescence was the Thrasher compilations, the Thrasher magazine skate rock compilations. I got turned on to so many punk bands that way.
Yeah, exactly. Me too. I love those Thrasher comps. And, you know, in the skate videos too, you know, at the end they'd show the credits and be like, oh, cool. That song was by a band called Sonic Youth. I should check them out. You know, so I think that was a big foray into that sort of stuff. But I was raised on like classic rock and, you know, the Eagles, Stones, all that good stuff.
I don't know if you've had the opportunity to be in a van on tour lately with just FM radio instead of, you know, the 8,000 ways we have to access media now. But those classic rock playlists are like frozen in amber. Like, it's still like Golden Earring and the worst Led Zeppelin songs. And, you know, God, they seem to play Axl Rose's cover of Live and Let Die like every 45 minutes, and it's just excruciating.
Yeah, constant rotation, man. I don't really think they've changed much. The people have spoken and they like what they like, I guess. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, I'm 29, I guess, so I do remember life before smartphones and the internet and shit. You know, I'm not like, I wasn't totally raised on the internet or anything, but it's funny to talk to friends who are a bit older than me, you know, like in their 50s or something. And I'll be like, what was it like to tour before you had an iPhone and just could put the maps in? And they're just like, you had to go to a lot of payphones and call the promoters and be like, I'm at this gas station, come meet me, and then take us there.
Right.
Yeah, and like you said, just listening like you're at the mercy of FM and AM radio driving through the middle of fucking Oklahoma or whatever, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny touring with this Japanese band. George, the guitar player, does most of the driving because he's an incredible driver, and he listens to a lot of FM radio because he's really into Sweet and like Mott the Hoople and any of the Steve Marriott bands, and so he loves classic rock. But like there's times when he's just mashing the seek button and it keeps landing on the same like 97.4, some commercial country radio station, because we're in the middle of nowhere, because he's from a dense country where there's always 22 radio stations on the dial. He's always baffled by like, is this thing broken? Why does he keep coming back to the same station? No, it's because we're outside of South Bend, Indiana, and that's just the only station, man.
Yeah, all you're gonna get right there is like some Trace Atkins or some Fire from some preacher, you know.
So, you moved to Chicago and immediately started putting out cassette-based EPs.
I'd say so.
And then you got involved with Dead Oceans, and you've been pretty much on tour constantly ever since, huh?
Yeah, I've been a big road dog since I was about 20 years old or so.
Yeah.
When I first moved to Chicago, I went to college for a little bit, but I dropped out shortly thereafter, just out of laziness and just I was never a great student or anything. I didn't want to be in school. Going to college was just kind of an excuse to get out of my parents' house when I turned 18 or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I went to like a kind of a crappy art school, quit, and then I just kind of started pursuing music a whole lot. And yeah, I played in a lot of like basements and house shows around Chicago, kind of getting involved with the weirdo scene there.
Right. Was there a band? Was it like a specific band you were in, or were you doing solo stuff? Or
I was doing solo stuff, but I think it was more like kind of noisy and droney. It wasn't really sing songs or anything. But yeah, I played with a bunch of like different kind of crappy bands and stuff that went nowhere. But there was like a big a friend group I met that had this big warehouse that was real cool. They had 2 or 3 shows a week, awesome bands from around the country would stay there, and I'd go there every night. That was kind of like, home base for me to get like my musical education and sort of meet a lot of the people I still talk to this day at that.
Would I know any of the bands around that scene?
There's like this band Tiger Hatchery was really big for me. Cobble, like a lot of like noise bands and stuff.
Right.
A lot of really weird stuff.
So you said that you dropped out of school out of laziness, and I think that's interesting because I'm learning a lot of just having this podcast about depression, and I'm beginning to believe less and less in laziness and more that like there are ways that depression and attention deficit disorder manifest themselves, and one of them is just an inability to continue to do something you're just not meant to do.
Absolutely.
I mean, I did 3 years of college, and dropped out. Thor, who I interviewed last week, same thing, 1 year of college, moved to San Francisco, sort of fell off the planet for a minute and kind of clawed his way back as a professional musician, which sounds like what you and I both did too.
Yeah, I knew that I wanted to play music. I kind of accepted the fact early on. And I'm glad I started where I did at ground zero of underground music. There literally was no money. I wasn't even involved in a music scene where anybody was successful. Like all my peers were just on the same level. There was no concept of like, well, this is gonna get big. I think the biggest band from our scene, like, did an opening tour for somebody getting $200 a night, and they're like, that's the biggest this can get, right. And that's the absolute pinnacle of success, is getting an opening tour where you get to like go out to LA and you get $200 a night, split between 4 people. That is insanity. Those people are lucky. I'm jealous of them.
Right.
That taught me early on that, I didn't really have this high concept of anything besides making art and making music for making art and music's sake. And Chicago kind of, I guess, prides itself on that. People in Chicago talk a lot of shit. In other cities, it's a shit-talking town, for sure.
Yeah.
Not everybody, but, there's a lot of negative energy, for sure. Like, it's the Midwest, it's cold as hell, and people there are, like, really quick to be like, fuck this, fuck you, fuck me, fuck New York, fuck LA, Chicago where it's at. We don't need any industry here. Mm-hmm. And so that was kind of ingrained into my head. It's like, we make art and we're making it for art's sake and not for the success or anything like that. And there's good parts to that and there's bad parts to that. But, the good parts to it were that it taught me to work really hard and just, have fun with it and not really be scared of fucking up because, it's not like I'm going to get any bigger.
Yeah, I mean, certainly your recorded output indicates a really strong work ethic. I mean, there's like 5 LPs in less than 8 years, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah, I guess that comes with the territory of living in Chicago too. There's lots of collaboration and the music scenes sort of cross-pollinate with one another, and I think the big center of all of it is improvising. Mm-hmm. Sort of improvised music. So you can always, even if, I'm writing folky songs or whatever, I'll do like a hour-long drone set with somebody, It all kind of bleeds together.
Yeah. Are you associated at all with the Old Town Folk School there? Is that in Lincoln Park? I can't even remember now.
It's in Lincoln Square.
That's right.
A couple of neighborhoods up from Lincoln Park.
Mm-hmm.
No, not really. I know some people who had worked there. I've been there a lot. I've played there a couple times, I think.
Yeah.
But as far as associating with anybody kind of in that scene, not really, no.
Yeah. You've been real open lately on social media about struggling with cocaine and other drugs. When did all that start?
Well, I've been using drugs regularly since I was really young, 14, 15.
Yeah.
You know, as far as like harder stuff, I think that came around in my late teens, early 20s.
Mm-hmm.
As far as cocaine goes, that was probably my biggest one. I've done every drug under the sun, but cocaine's the one I've done the most of, for sure.
Yeah.
I had like a prescription of Ritalin and Adderall when I was younger.
Yeah.
In my teens, and I was doing that until I was about 22, and then my doctor cut me off. He's like, "You're doing this too much. I'm gonna stop you." So after that, I was like, "Well, shit, I like speed so much, and I've done coke a whole bunch, so why not just do this all the time?" And probably when I was like 20 or 21, it started to become, it was a weekend thing. Like, let's party this weekend, and then it became like, oh, all right, I'll pitch in $20 for the bag on a Wednesday night. And it became like, well, I don't want to keep being a mooch off my friends, so I'll just get my own. And then, down the road, it's like, well, I just woke up and I have to, get out of bed and not be hungover, so I'll do some blow. And then it just, became shooting it and all that shit. It snowballed over the course of several years.
Yeah. So you were prescribed drugs for attention deficit when you were just a kid, huh?
Yeah, when I was like 14, 15.
Yeah. Were you having like some issues with depression then?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I can remember being like 9 years old and hating myself. A kid shouldn't hate themselves that young.
No.
I remember just not being comfortable in my own skin as soon as I could have my own conscious thoughts, outside of what my teachers or parents told me, and I could kind of think for myself. I remember thinking like, oh, I hate who I am. I hate what I look like. So that struck me from a very young age. So yeah, depression came real quick, real young.
I think that this is purely like, I'm not a psychologist. I don't play one on TV, but I think that there's a direct relationship between issues with concentration and ability to sort of stay focused and depression in kids who are in school because you're told by your teachers you're lazy because you're not focusing, or you're stupid because you did so poorly on this test. And man, when you're little, you just internalize that shit and it becomes like a thing, an overwhelming narrative in the back of your mind that you're somehow less than or not as good as because you can't focus.
Yeah, I was always very insecure and self-conscious, even as a child. And to this day, I struggle with it, I've just never, I'm getting better now. But I never liked myself. I was always the first one to put myself down. It was a total defense mechanism. I'm really grateful that I have such a wonderful sense of humor and I love to make people laugh, but it comes from, it's a self-defense thing, I was always the first one to make fun of myself, so you can't. I was always the first one to talk shit on myself. If I shit on myself, then that doesn't really give you an opening to shit on me. So from a very young age, I was always very self-deprecating, self-loathing, and I just wore that all around. For most of my life, I wore like, oh, I'm a piece of shit. And that gave me later down the road an excuse to party more. The more I partied, I'd up the I'm a piece of shit, and people found it funny, and I found it funny. That was a way to cope with it. Like, oh, I stayed up for 3 days straight doing heroin and coke. Man, I'm a piece of shit. Ha, ha, ha.
Yeah.
So kind of being self-aware in a dark way justified that somehow.
Were you a good skater?
No, I was a total poser. I hung out with a lot of people who skated. I enjoyed skateboarding culture more than I did skating.
Yeah, my fear of skateboarding was I was going to break my wrist and not be able to play drums. So I was mostly a downhill skater because, you weren't upside down as much.
Sure. I think once I got into guitar and stuff, I sort of dropped the dreams of skateboarding. Guitar sort of gave me an activity that was something outside of school or anything like that. And that was where I got my creative fix from.
Yeah. Yeah, I got really into drums around 10, 11, 12 years old. I think I got my first kit right around then. And I channeled a lot of my feelings of inadequacy and anxiety into playing all the time. And somehow drugs pulled me off task from everything else in my life except that. And I'm not sure why that is.
Yeah, I've always stayed busy with music. Like you said, I have a really sort of a big recorded output, a lot for a short amount of time. But yeah, drugs started to I felt it taking away from me the last couple of years especially. But
yeah.
I mean, and doing drugs and partying was pretty fun. For a few years, I was good at it. I was really funny when I was fucked up. I wasn't actually present, but I could be in a place. Yeah, the first time I got drunk when I was I don't know, 13 or something. I didn't have a glass of wine at Thanksgiving and my parents thought it was funny. I blacked out. I was in my friend's backyard. I learned to drink from Midwest shitheads who have mufflers in their front yard and stuff. I drank and I blacked the fuck out. I don't remember the whole night. I remember drinking 2 Bud Lights or whatever it was, and then I woke up what? The first time I drank, I got fucked up, and I loved it. As soon as I drank, the moment I got fucked up, I was like, "This is it. This is what I'm gonna do for the rest of my life. This rules." I don't hate myself right now.
Yeah.
I'm not thinking about nothing about anything else right now. I'm having fun with my friends. I'm here in the moment. I can finally feel good about myself. I felt great. And it wasn't ooh, I'll enjoy this more down the road and moderate. It was I'm gonna get fucked up every time I drink from now on.
There's that famous Jerry Garcia quote about, "I just want to feel like this all the time," when he was on heroin.
Yeah, exactly. And it feels great at the time.
Yeah.
And again, partying was pretty fun for.
Yeah, I'm not one of those sober people who's I don't understand why anybody does drugs. All drugs are bad. I acknowledge that drugs are a huge productivity tool. If you're someone who is hampered by anxiety or self-doubt when you're creating, the ability to turn off that critic in your head that hates you, which you think at the time, this is the real me. The real me hates me, and you can shut that guy up for a while and get some work done. And it seems like it's working. And of course, it is an amazing productivity tool until it whipsaws around and tries to kill you.
Yeah, absolutely. And for a long time, drinking and doing drugs and playing music they all went hand in hand together. It fucking rocked. Going on when I first started going on tour when I was 19 or something. You get fucked up every day. It's part of it, and it felt great. It was a really bonding experience, honestly. And I probably wouldn't know most of the people I know now had I not been getting fucked up.
Yeah.
I had a great time playing a show and then going to a party after, staying up till the sun came up. Hangovers when I was younger were oh, let's get an omelet. Ha, ha, ha.
Right.
But then after a while, they become just I want to die, And then it just eventually just became partying for partying's sake. I had nothing else to do.
It's interesting because I don't I feel like whenever I have a guest, I try to do some research beforehand, and sometimes it verges on feeling a little creepy because I'm looking for gossip so that I have informed questions to ask. But you see these very high profile bands well, I don't want to call anybody out by name, but you hear these stories about the band played 90 seconds of music followed by 10 minutes of tantrum by the member who's having the drug problem, followed by him walking off stage. There's no Ryley Walker stories of throwing gigs, though. You seem to have at least, and maybe it's the Chicago thing, very committed to playing an entire set, no matter how bad it got.
Yeah, I've definitely played a lot of bad sets out there. Um, but yeah, I mean, I guess I'm proud of the sort of work ethic I've had. Um, but again, it was becoming hampered. Like I couldn't have done that work without getting fucked up. Like the only way I could have done the work was being fucked up. I wasn't able to do it sober. I wasn't able to do it um, not not totally lit on coke and booze.
So you were partially using drugs to conquer stage fright or performance anxiety?
It's funny, like, and I guess it's teetering on the edge of cliche, like in the Alcoholics Anonymous room and stuff. But I was wearing a mask, 100%. I like to be known as the party guy. I thought it was great that people knew I was fucking crazy. It's just this big ego thing that I had, and I'm still learning to break down. It's totally an ego thing. Because I didn't like myself for most of my life, I discovered that I liked myself a lot when I was fucked up.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, consequences be damned. I was never like an angry drunk. I never lashed out. I never started fights. I was never a creep or anything to the extent of harming anybody or anything like that. But I loved who I was when I was fucked up.
It's interesting that you would say you never harmed anybody, but you sort of it seems to be intentionally excluding the like yourself. Like,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
obviously people were concerned along the way, about my well-being and stuff. But I loved who I was when I was fucked up. And I was proud. Like, I remember, like, playing shows. I remember saying, like, man, people who don't get fucked up in this business are, like, stupid or posers. Like, that guy doesn't drink. That girl doesn't drink. I drink. I'm the crazy guy. And
right,
it's 100% ego-driven.
right, right. That's not a drinking problem. This is a drinking problem.
Yeah, like, I got the problem. Like, I want people to think I'm crazy. I want people to expect me to be fucked up. And I want my shows to be like this thing where it's like, oh, what's he gonna do next? What crazy shit is he gonna do? And then, people after the shows who are real nice, it's not them, it's me, would be like, let's go get fucked up. And I'm like, yeah, I'm always down for the party. I'm always coming home, and when the sun comes up, I want people to see the fucked up me. I want them to be on the ride of Ryley, Ryley, Ryley. It's all about me. So that was a big factor in continuing to drive my drug use and to keep getting worse. I had these like visions of being some sort of martyr where I die, where I get, where I die of an overdose or drink myself to death, which is a horrible thing. That's absolutely, and that's insane. That is not normal thinking. That's insanity. That's absolute selfish, pompous, asshole-ish, dickish.
I mean, we have a strong myth around that in our culture. Like, the sort of, I'm going to be the Charles Bukowski of drums, like.
Yeah, exactly. And that drove it for so long, and I wanted there to be people talking about, oh man, he gets fucked up. And, I had friends and people who came to my shows and stuff like that who were like, man, I took off work tomorrow because you're in town because I know we're going to get fucked up. And I was like, well, I wanted people to expect that I was going to party with them and stuff. Eventually, after years of touring, it became every city I went to, I had a cocaine guy or somebody who could get cocaine for me.
Sure.
So when I rolled into town, I was spent at least $100.
Had your dude. Yeah.
Always had my dude. And it became completely normal to just get fucked up every night, feel like shit every day, maybe feel a little better by sound check and kind of, struggle through that. And by the show, I was drunk and I could kind of perform to the best I could at the time, which was not that well.
Yeah.
And there was shows that we pulled off when I was fucked up that were great, that it crushed, Every now and then the sort of lucid energy of alcohol and drugs mixes and we killed it sometime. But, 70% of the time it was just, we could have done better.
Yeah. I was on a bus tour with a band where everybody had cleaned up. Well, except for one, that's a whole other story. But previously, with a different drummer, that band had toured with a dealer on the bus who had his own flight case. full of drugs, and he just ran an accounting like a spreadsheet, like the bass player owes me X for, this much blow. It was insane.
Wowee. Yeah, see, I never got to that level, thank God.
Right. You didn't have the dealer in the van.
Yeah, there was a time in my life where I would have thought that was the greatest thing in the world, And all this sort of erratic behavior, I pushed and pushed more to be normal by hanging out with people who had the same sort of brain chemistry as me at the time. I surrounded myself by people who like to get as fucked up as me, or more fucked up, or less fucked up, whatever.
Right.
I didn't really hang with people who were like, yeah, I'm going to have a beer and go to bed. I got to work tomorrow, or, the kids, I got to put the kids, I hung out with people. Every town I went to, I was like, oh, I got to hit up this person because they're going to go out, so that also, I had this sort of codependent relationship with people in different cities who I knew would get fucked up with me, and I was using them, I was using them to find drugs, I wasn't going to open up about my life and tell my problems with these people. I just wanted to use them to either normalize my behavior, to make me feel better about myself, or to find me drugs.
Right.
It's just me using people again with the selfishness and the ego. I didn't treat these people as friends or equals. They were people who could help me get by another day fucked up.
It's interesting that I think like the sort of myth about like, the flame that burns twice as bright burns half as long, and like, and even I mentioned the Electrical Audio forums because I'm on there fairly good bit. One of the threads on there is name one artist whose output, whose creative work after they got sober is anything near as good as what they were doing when they were partying. Of course, it seems like Jason Isbell has just crushed that myth because, he's absolutely brilliant. But I think the misconception for a lot of people is that people get sober and disappear. But I think part of it is historically with the record industry being as exploitative as it was, they would work with artists who they could sort of control and who were kind of on an IV drip of cash and drugs. And as soon as they kind of fought to have some self-determination, they got kicked to the curb.
Yeah, man, absolutely. And I don't think I ever signed a bad deal, something like Van Morrison kind of era or anything like that, or Motown shit. I was definitely like, I wasn't thinking about the business side of things and all, I'm just starting to get my life in order a little bit right now. I rushed into everything, man. Everything, that's the addict in me. Everything is now. I want this advance now. I want this now. I want to get this cool guitar now instead of thinking about buying anything else that I actually need, And money just went out real fast. Any at my worst, it's like if I got paid $500 for a gig, I'm like, that is so much blow and dope. That is awesome. Right. That's awesome. And, maybe I can pay my kids still in there too. But, that's drugs. Everything was just like, I could put a lot of that up my nose. That's amazing.
So at some point you had to make a decision to change lifestyles, and you've got, according to the last thing I saw on Twitter, you've got a little over 3 months right now. But is this your first attempt, or were there other attempts to get sober?
There was other attempts that were a bit ill-fated, and again, the addict in me was just like, I want this immediately without the work. As much recorded output as I have and stuff like that, as much as I've toured, I don't mean this in a negative way. I'm kind of inherently like a bit lazy and a bit slow to get around to stuff. I do things at my own pace.
Right.
Which is just, I'm fortunate that I set myself up in a way where I don't have to have a regular job. I take things as they come. I do it at my own pace. So, getting sober, I mean, there's so many points throughout the last 10 years where it became apparent that I have a problem, to just kind of streamline it, partying, touring. I think about 4 or 5 years ago, it started becoming apparent. I'm like, what? I think I get fucked up more than anybody I know. I think I'm more drunk. And I met a cocaine dealer in Chicago who was just fronting me insane amounts of stuff. I would get an ounce of cocaine fronted to me,
Mm-hmm.
because sort of weird friendship. I'm not gonna fucking say their name or anything. But
Yeah, you don't have to do
yeah,
that.
yeah, but just this friendship we had. So I was getting fronted so much stuff, and then I was taking advantage of that situation, then being like, "Oh, you don't have to pay me back. I'm doing great right now. Like we're homies. Like just take this." So every night I'd go out, I would have it. Ask anybody around me. Any night I went out, I had cocaine. People would come to me and be like, "Yo, can I get a bump? Yeah, I know you have it. Where can I get it?" I was the cocaine haver at every situation. Strangers would walk up to me and be like, "Hey, I heard you always have cocaine. Can I have some?" I'm like, "Yeah, of course."
That's a great thing in a city with the Chicago police force basically being the most heavily armed and best organized gang in the city.
Yeah, right. Just basically Gestapo there, motherfuckers. But I always had it. It was and like maybe like any other major city, and I guess it sounds crazy to people who don't use drugs or non-addicts, but in big cities like that, in music scenes, like cocaine is not taboo. It's really not. Like the idea of asking somebody if they have blow is really not some far-fetched, insane question, or going to the bathroom and with somebody and doing blow is not this foreign thing. It happens all the time. Like I can spot it as an addict from a mile away when people
Oh yeah.
come out of the bathroom wiping their nose and shit. It's like, well, they weren't in there taking a shit. They were in there doing lines.
Right.
So that's a very normal thing in the music biz in a big city. And that again, that justified. It's like, yeah, this is normal. I was the cocaine guy. I always had it. And my behavior started to become increasingly more erratic over the last few years, where it's just every single night I'm doing it, 365 days a year, surrounding myself with people who do it. It's normal. And a couple years ago, 2017, around Thanksgiving, I had my first, like, okay, I have got to be done with this shit. I was partying all night at a bar in Chicago. I went home. It's like an after party after the bar closed, doing blow with this group of people. And I drove. I drove there completely fucked up. And all night into like 3, 4 in the morning, and I'm doing blow with this group of people, and I was completely blacked out. And there's no other way to put it. I was like fucking sexually assaulted by this like group of guys that started like grabbing at my dick and shit, and it was really odd. And I had to like kind of fight them off, and that's the last thing I remember. And then I woke up in my bed, and I was like, "How the fuck did I get home? Everything last night is blurry. This is really fucked up." I drove home completely blacked out last night. I'm 100% positive I probably killed somebody. So I look outside at the street, and my car is still intact. I'm like, okay, I got home. But I had this thing in my head. It's like, I could have been in jail so easily last night. I could have killed somebody. I could have killed myself. I put myself in a really horrible situation that's like kind of traumatizing, because I was like sexually abused when I was a kid too. I'm like, what? I'm okay. Now I'm just like putting myself in these traps. I'm setting myself up to be for either death or jail or just really traumatic shit. This is starting to be something that's out of my control, and I need help. I have to get help. So I started going to AA meetings, and I got like a good month of sobriety on my own before I just completely relapsed and went even harder. I stopped going to meetings. I had a sponsor. I stopped calling the sponsor. And I was like, okay, I got a month in. I have this under control. I'll just take it easy. But, once I went back out to drink,
There's no taking it easy. No.
Yeah. I went really, really hard.
Yeah.
So, and that kind of gets us into the present day, which is I moved to New York last fall, October, for a myriad of reasons. I wanted to come here for the music. I need to get out of Chicago, not because I was running away from a drug problem. That might have had something to do with it, but I just wanted to get out. I've been there a really long time.
Yeah.
It's time for bigger and better things. So I moved to the city, with every intention of kind of, like, all right, I'm going to go here, focus, really take it easy on the drugs and drinking and stuff. I move here, and a relationship sort of falls apart because of my using. And then that gives me a catalyst to really start using. Like, okay, well, I don't have anybody to be accountable to except myself now, so I can get really, really fucked up.
Right.
And I'm really depressed now. I'm in a new city. I'm finally making a bit of money playing music. I can spend the cash on some real shit. I'm at my darkest now. So I start getting really into dope too. I'm snorting and doing speedballs all the time, on top of drinking. And if Chicago normalizes drug use in the music scene, like New York really normalizes drug use. And again, that's nobody's problem but my own. I bought into it, and I started just totally self-destructing late last year, early this year.
Mm-hmm.
To the point of insanity. I'm up for days on end. I'm saying insane shit to my friends. I'm a threat to myself 100%. Everybody can see that I am like, this isn't Ryley partying, being a goofball, having a good time. This is Ryley on an absolute death mission. And that segues really nicely into our big hero, Richard Thompson. I went on a tour with him earlier this year. And again, his tour with him is great. Nothing to do with him. But I was alone. I was opening this tour for him. It was on the West Coast and sort of mountain states like the Rockies, Montana, Colorado, Idaho, all the way south into New Mexico. Right. And they were in a tour bus, and you'll know this term. I was chasing their bus, which means they were in the bus traveling overnight. For listeners who aren't familiar with the tour bus, when you're in a tour bus, you don't get hotels. After the gig, you pack up, and the bus drives overnight into the next city, which is, they could be 8-hour drives. If you're in the bus, you sleep, you wake up, you're in the new city. Me, I was in a rental car chasing their bus, which meant I drive 2 hours after the show. I'm parking in like Walmart parking lots, getting sleep, driving 6 hours the next morning. So I'm all alone. I'm isolated on these drives every day.
So you don't have anybody with you. You're just your guitar and a rental car.
Me, guitar, and a rental car. And I did that because I really needed the money at the time. I was like, no overhead, no tour manager, no merch person. I'm just opening. It'll be great. It'll be me, my guitar. And it is kind of romantic at times to be alone, traveling. But, I was out of my mind at the time on drugs and just at my absolute worst with depression in my life. Suicidal thoughts. I'm going to kill myself. You name it. So alone, and I started to crack. I absolutely started to crack. Every night after the show, I think I played okay most nights. The shows were again. And every night I was like going to a homeless person, and like whether we're in fucking Santa Cruz or Boise, Idaho, I'd find like a homeless person on the street and like, hey, where can you get dope in this city? I'll hook you up with a bag. I'll buy you a few points if you hook me up. And I was just like snorting dope, snorting coke every night, really depressed because of shit in my personal life that I don't want to get into. And
that's fine.
Yeah, and just being alone on the road. I guess up the West Coast I had friends, but then once we started to get to cities like Spokane and Salt Lake City, I didn't have a friend in the world there to kind of count on, and I became increasingly erratic. And there was a day off on tour where I took a bunch of sleeping pills, and I was like, this is it. I'm just going to fucking kill myself. And I was in a hotel in Truth or Consequences, New Mexico on a day off because I had heard it's a cool town. And I was like, this is where I'm just going to peace out in this fucking Motel 6.
So you selected Consequences.
Yeah, exactly, right? It's kind of a fitting title. Day off, I'm like, here's a town where I don't know anybody. I walked around. I had a good taco. And I went to a CVS, got a bottle of sleeping pills. I had a bunch of dope. And I was just like, I'm going to kill myself. And then I ate all these sleeping pills and did a bunch of dope. And I'm like, this is where I'm going to peace out. And I was very accepting of the fact. I'm like, I'm at my worst right now. Why not just end it here in this shitty hotel that costed $30? That'll be a romantic end to this bullshit I've been putting up, which is just inside my head, really depressed. Don't know who I am outside of music and drugs. So I attempted to kill myself. Tick tock, the night passes. I remember going to sleep, and I wake up. I wake up, and the first thing that came to my mind is like, God damn it. Why the fuck did I wake up? Why didn't I die? This sucks. I was pissed, honestly. And then I broke down. I cried. I had a really shitty morning. I went and got some coffee. And then I drove to, I think it was Santa Fe, New Mexico, for the next show. And I made the show, played it like nothing happened, had a great show or whatever, and then slept in my car that night and just cried and cried and cried. What the hell is wrong with me? Where am I going? And that was my second big wake up. And I think the first sort of spiritual out of body kind of moment I'd had in my whole life where it's like, I've been kind of saved. You know, this is an opportunity. This is something that I have to seek further. I have to get professional help. I tried to get sober on my own by white knuckling it a few meetings there, but like, I've got to clean up my act.
You know, it's funny that you woke up and said, God damn it, because I played with Vic Chestnut many years ago and was kind of knew him until he committed suicide. I don't know if you know Vic.
I'm a huge fan.
He took a bunch of pills. He had more than one attempt, and one of them, his best friend was with him in critical care, and Vic sat up and said exactly the same thing when he woke up. Like,
ooh, yeah, man. So. I'm such a big fan of Vic. I'm sorry that you knew him personally. Yeah, it's and you know, and I think back when I was at my lowest, laying in the Motel 6, waking up saying that, it's just like, eventually, later that evening, I was just like, the amount of people who love me, like I can't hurt these people anymore, because I'm not only hurting myself over these last couple of years, it's hurting people who love me. It's hurting, you know, physically, not just emotionally. Like there's like heartache and pain that I'm causing people through this.
Yeah.
And I've always been a people pleaser, for good or bad. You know, I hate myself, but I want to help people as much as I can. I'm like, at the very minimum, man, there's people out there who have had my back from the start and still do. And I'm hurting these people, and I need to get help. I need to get fucking better, man.
I want to revisit something you said earlier about being a survivor of sexual abuse. We don't have to get into details because I realize it's incredibly painful, but did that predate your ADD and depression as an adolescent?
Yeah, I was an adolescent. It was like another neighbor that kind of took advantage of me as a kid, you know, and that still sits with me. This is something I talk about in therapy that I haven't really even told friends of mine, you know. It's, you know, or family for that matter, you know. It's something that I dealt with my whole life. You know, I always felt really inadequate, you know, that made me feel inadequate with my body. You know, I've always had this horrible self-image of like, ugh, gross, you know, like nobody really likes me. Nobody thinks I'm attractive. You know, I felt really ugly my whole life. You know, it's made me feel, you know, and anybody that says they love me, you know, I latch on to immediately, you know, whether that's any sort of girlfriend in my life, you know, who says they love me, like I latch on immediately and I go nuts, you know. I kind of have this impulsive, obsessive sort of feeling with wanting to be loved. Please love me. Please say you love me. Please confirm that you love me. Say that you love me again, please. Can you say it before I leave? You know, I always want to hear that. And I never believe anybody who says it, even though they mean it. You know, it's just not fucked up. You know,
and you exhaust those people with your need to like be affirmed. And that's where a lot of the anxiety and jealousy in my life came from. It's like this belief that I was not only unlovable, but would ultimately be betrayed because of my unlovableness. And so I had a lot of trouble with trust in a lot of relationships before I started like working a program and going to therapy.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny, I'm the one who's not been pretty untrustable the whole time, you know. I've lied, I've cheated on people, but at the same time, I'm looking for all this affirmation constantly,
Yeah.
and it's just me projecting 100%. I've cheated on girlfriends. I've lied to them. I've used my drugs as an excuse, like, oh, it's just I'm fucked up all the time. I need help, and it's just I've been the king of gaslighting people, man. I've been
Yeah.
the king of that.
Have you ever done? Do you know what your ACE score is? The adverse childhood experience.
I have not done an ACE score at all.
It's something that someone turned me on to early on in this podcast. There's a physician, a woman in San Francisco who works with kids who've survived trauma, and they have a list of, like, did you experience a house fire when you were a child? Did you experience physical or sexual abuse? Did you have an alcoholic parent? And it's a fairly simple, like, 1 to 10 test, and it's a strong indicator, especially the higher your score is, of like your level of vulnerability to substance abuse, addiction, but also other health problems. So I was just curious about that. I'll send you later on. I'll send you a link to her TED Talk. I realized, like, oh, a TED Talk, great, but I think she's one of the people who really deserves to be heard.
No, I'll definitely check it out. I'm open to anything like that right now.
Well, it seems like that's what your experience in Truth or Consequences, New Mexico, and that's really poetic, probably accidentally, but you seem to have gotten on the path again.
And all this sort of and masking, again, going back to masking the sort of things I've done wrong in my life with drug use, projecting everything onto people who love me, my own insecurities, my own faults.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, going back to being abused, it made me really untrustworthy of people to this day, and that's something I'm still working on, where I'm constantly looking for affirmation in people. And I'm sure, like, 9 out of 10 addicts in the room can agree, like, we constantly are seeking affirmation, man. I want, even if that's like a positive affirmation, like, or negative, like, I want people to tell me my music is great. I want people to tell me that my drug use is cool. I want people to admire how fucked up I got. When I'm in relationships, I constantly need to hear I'm loved, and I need to hear that I'm worthy of love, while at the same time, being accusatory of, infidelity or anything like that. It's absolutely insane, fucked up behavior that I project on people, and it all led to me getting more and more and more fucked up because I hated myself more and more and more. And that led up to, attempting to kill myself. And that leads to where I eventually got done with that tour at the end of, I guess that was in February. And then early March rolls around. I come back to New York. I have this sort of awakening where I'm like, what the fuck happened to me out there, man? I really need to seek help. And so for like another week or two, I continued to binge on booze and drugs and anything to get my hands on, just to numb this sort of pain that I was feeling and have felt, and sort of trying to forget about how I tried to kill myself, man.
Yeah.
I was out of control. And that's the start where I reached out. I had a night where I just completely blacked out. Just completely, I got so fucked up. I was on a solo mission. I bought some heroin and I bought some cocaine. I was speedballing. I probably drank 30 beers, 20 shots. I was a complete shithouse. I don't remember how I got home. I woke up in the worst hangover I've had in my adult life. I was vomiting. And by the way, in those 2 weeks, I was just isolated in my room, getting so fucked up. I was barely going out. It wasn't even like I was going out to party.
Right.
Or see music. I was just in my room getting completely shithoused.
Right.
And then I just woke up one day and I was like, this has been the worst year of my life. I've accomplished a lot. I put out some records. I got to do some cool tours, but this has been the worst year of my life. I have felt nothing except the need to get fucked up. Every day was about the next high. I was never present for any conversation I had, good or bad. I was not there. I was thinking about, how can I get high? Who can get me high? When I play that show in Omaha tomorrow, who there can get me high? It wasn't like, oh, I'm looking forward to seeing friends. It's like, who can get me fucked up? And people are beginning to see this absolute pain in me. Every day was
miserable. My physical health was getting really bad. I'd put on a bunch of weight. I looked like shit. I looked like a fucking catcher's mitt. My face is bloated.
Mm-hmm.
I was breaking out in rashes and acne, and my gut was protruding. I looked like shit, man.
That's a really amazing simile. I hate to interrupt, but I look like a catcher's mitt. That's one for the ages, man.
Yeah, feel free to use it.
Yeah, but your body doesn't tolerate, your liver starts to just give up after a while. You get the histamine reaction. You start to break out in weird rashes and stuff, and because you got inflammation everywhere. And yeah,
everywhere, dude. I looked like ass. And not, I was never like a fucking beautiful person to get, but I just look like shit, man. And people were like noticing. My friends were like, "You're getting fat as fuck." I wasn't taking care of myself. I was eating garbage every day.
yeah.
The only thing to eat was when I was hungover. I'd go get a fucking chicken Philly from the bodega down the street and have like 2 tall boy Bud Lights with it and then start my day. I was just a complete wreck. I was, and another cliche saying from the room is like, the end to our drinking and use is jail or death. And like, yeah, that was really likely, especially in my state. I was in the mood to die. But the most likely scenario was I was going to become a wasteoid, which in what I'm saying is like a guy who just sits at a bar day drinking all day, talking about how he used to go on tour and used to have this music career, just becoming that guy who's just sits at a bar all day, looks like shit, and talks about how good they used to have it, and clearly depressed and lost everything. That was becoming apparent, and I was beginning to get this reputation as a party guy, and festival bookers and stuff were like, yeah, like he's great, but he just parties too much. Let's book somebody else, So I was erratic, man. I could see that door starting to close as far as a career was going, like I was going to start to lose gigs because of my use and because like, well, let's give this to somebody who wants to be here and just doesn't want to be a fucking fucked up person. And again, I was never like mean to anybody or harmful to anybody, but I was just like, I wasn't trustworthy because I was just getting fucked up all the time. My label was beginning to see it. So I woke up with this miserable hangover of death one day, and I started contacting friends, and I'm like, close friends of mine. I'm like, hey, this is a problem. This is officially like we're at code red right now. Like I tried to kill myself. I want to die. The only thing that can relieve me right now from this pain in my mind is dying. That's how out of my mind I was at the time. Like the only way out is death right now. There's this beam that hangs in my closet in the room I'm actually sitting in right now. And I was looking at that beam every single day going, I can go get an extension cord at the hardware store down the street and fucking hang myself. That is what can solve this. I'm looking at the beam right now and it just has coats on it right now. And I don't think that at all. Thank God.
Yeah.
Like I would look at that every day when I woke up. And this is again, how insane my behavior and selfish and out of my mind was. I looked at just thinking I could hang myself. If I go to the hardware store down the street and get an extension cord, I could wrap it around my neck and fucking hang myself and put myself out of this misery. And I knew that was erratic. So I called, I had this big European tour I was supposed to do in April, and these were probably the biggest gigs of my career thus far as, really good money that would set me up for a long time, big shows. I had a killer band lined up. We were all set to make some really good money finally. Like, this is kind of the tour that was like, fuck yeah, all the hard work paid off. I'm going to come home with probably like 15 grand in my pocket, which is more money than I've ever seen in my life at one time. This is like, I'll be able to live comfortably for like a year on this money. I don't need much,
Do you live alone?
I have a roommate, but it's New York. So what are you going to do?
Yeah.
So I was going to come home with like 15 grand. I'm like, 15 grand is so much goddamn money. That's going to set me up for the rest of the year. I won't have to work. I won't have to do shit except enjoy my life. This is going to be great. So I called the guy who runs my label and I was like, hey, I'm fucked up right now. I really, really need help. I really need help badly. Like I'm going to die. But but I have this European tour I got to go on. So after I get back, maybe do you know anybody who can go to inpatient rehab? Because he had dealt with this situation before with other artists on the label. And he's like, yeah, you need to call Music Cares, this company.
Yeah, buddy. Good people.
Great people. They saved my life. I called them and I go, hey, I'm ready to go to rehab. I think this is what I have to do to get better. I can't do it on my own. I tried. I'm willing to submit. And they're like, yeah. So they asked some basic questions, about my life and my use and whatnot, my financial situation. And I'm like, I can't afford rehab. That's, it's out of my hands to afford something like that. And I don't have health insurance. So they're like, okay, we'll send you to rehab. I'm like, great, cool. I have this April European tour. I'll do my thing. I'll try to reel it in for that tour. And they're like, no. The only way we're paying for this rehab is you're canceling your European tour and you're going tomorrow.
Right now.
Yeah, you're going right the fuck now. Like, this is your chance. I'm like, well, what if I just do the tour? This is more money than I've ever seen. I really need it. And they're like, okay, then we're not doing it. This is your call. You cancel that tour and you go tomorrow. We'll pay for it. You don't. Sorry. And I was just like, fuck it. So I called the people I needed to call. I canceled that tour. And my ass was on a plane to Nashville the next day to go to rehab. And I went to rehab. And it was terrifying. It was embarrassing. Yeah. It was embarrassing at first. I was ashamed of myself. I was happy that I got a chance, But yeah, there's all these sort of feelings that come with it. Like, I don't belong here. This is weird. What the fuck is wrong with me? Mm-hmm. And then I sort of fought it at first. But, long story short, I knew I had to be there. Mm-hmm. I'm lucky I went there. It saved my life. To this day, I'm still practicing what they taught me in there. I'm going to several meetings a day. Yeah. And, if anybody ever wants to talk about rehab, they could reach out to me. It's like I had to be there. But today I've got 107 days sober, and I'm not doing it alone. I'm going to meetings every single day, sometimes two.
Yeah.
And that's how I did it, and that's what keeps me sober right now, is going to meetings and having accountability for the first time in my adult life, and having the willingness and being able to submit to people that can help me, and just listening. I've never listened to anybody in my life except for myself.
Yeah.
And I finally kind of am learning to know who I am outside of drugs and music. And it's funny, when I went to rehab in Nashville, I brought my guitar being like, cool, I'm going to write some cool songs while I'm down there. And now that I'm going to have this clarity, and they're like, no, don't bring this in. And I'm like, what the fuck? I'm a musician. That's what I do. And they're like, no, you need to discover who you are outside of drugs and music. You've never learned who you are. And I'm like, okay, solid point taken. And that was kind of one of the more freeing things in my life, and why, going back to what we first talked about in the beginning of this conversation, is having time off from touring is like, it doesn't bum me out at all. For the first time in my life, I'm not really concerned about the next gig. I'm really concerned about getting to the root of my issues and getting to the root of who I am, and finally discovering what the fuck I'm all about outside of drugs and music. And I'm learning a lot. I'm learning more every day. Things are slowly starting to turn, for better or worse. I'm learning a lot of bad shit about myself too. But I'm learning, and I'm present, and I'm listening for the first time maybe ever since I was a little kid. I'm finally attuned to the universe and willing, and I feel this sort of weight lift off my shoulders, and I'm really happy to learn about who I am. I'm not so worried about the next gig. Money's tight right now, but it doesn't bother me. I'm just really focused on sobriety. That's number one in my life.
Yeah. Well, that you talked about discovering some bad things about yourself. I mean, that's what your fourth step is all about, I mean, I'm not your sponsor, and I don't want to turn this into, a group conscious meeting or anything, but the thing that they didn't tell me for the first few years of my sobriety that probably would have helped me was that the steps are a way of getting all that negative stuff out of your head that makes you want to not feel your feelings. So if you look at it from that angle, it sort of becomes this methodical house cleaning where you deal with your resentments, and you deal with your fear, and you deal with your sadness, and you deal with your guilt, so that you don't have that moment where you're like, I don't want to feel these feelings anymore, and I know how to handle that. So
Yeah,
So,
exactly. And I'm actually on my fourth step right now, which is, for the listener out there and where it's make a fearless and searching a fearless moral inventory of ourselves. So just learn about all my anxieties and all the things that affect me and learn about why do I do what I do. I've never asked these. As soon as that question popped in my head, I just snorted it up my nose and fucking forgot about it.
right? Because
You know,
that's some hard shit, man. Like, it's not fun to look at yourself under a critical eye, unless there's a path to getting better, which is why there's a fifth step.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have a long way to go, man. I've got 100 something days in this. This journey is just starting. Rehab
Mhm.
was the start of it. I didn't figure out the answer in rehab. I got clean in rehab, but I'm just learning to like kind of get the first steps going, man. This is like going to be a lifelong process. I can't have one beer or use once more for the rest of my life, or just for today, as they say. But
Yeah.
I can't do that, man. I know for a fact that if I have one beer right now, that's going to be one night out of me calling the dope man. I can't. I drink to
Yeah.
black out. I do not drink to enjoy myself. I drink to
Yeah.
get up and turn everything off. So I'm finally learning these things about myself, and that's what keeps me sober right now.
Yeah.
Asking these questions and listening to people who have real sobriety under their belt. And again, those people don't have it figured out either. We're all fellow addicts in
We're
recovery.
all figured it out, man.
Yeah, and just having accountability for the first time in my life.
Mhm.
And something like this really helps me too. It helps to talk about these things and to speak with you, a fellow addict in recovery or somebody recovering from depression. It's a long way to go, man. But and it sounds crazy, but I'm excited to ask all these big questions finally. Um, I'm still learning to love myself, but I wake up every day like not hating myself, and I think that's great. I look in
Yeah.
the mirror and I don't feel like shit. I haven't felt like total shit in 110 days. There's
Mhm.
bad days, but I'm sober for them, and I can
Yeah.
deal with them. And
I
every
can
day,
tell you, as someone who's been sober 20 years now, that there will be days where you wake up feeling like shit, but at least like you have the tools now, you know, like,
yeah, absolutely. And I'm just really, really excited to keep all this going. It's been really awakening. It's been probably the best. No, not probably. It is the best decision I've made in my adult life to get sober and finally get help. I turned 30 in a couple weeks, and I can't tell you the amount of people in rehab who are like, "I wish I was your age when I figured this shit out," and that kind of keeps me going too. I don't. I
yeah.
just. I'm done, man. And it sounds simple and maybe oversimplified, but like I hit a fucking wall, man. I'm done. Like
Mhm.
I did it all. I did every drug under the sun. I hated myself. I tried to kill myself. I had fun with drugs. I enjoyed myself. I did it all, man. I did it all for
Mhm.
100 lifetimes. Like I'm done. Like I spiritually I know that. Like I am completely fucking done.
Yeah. You doing meetings. Sounds like you're doing a couple a day, or at least 7 a week. Are you doing any therapy?
Yeah, I go to therapy twice a week. I go to meetings once or twice a day.
Mhm.
I get uh, I sit down with my sponsor twice a week and we read the big book and we just shoot the shit, have lunch, whatever.
There's a
And
lot more to that than you think, I think. Like, I know that, like, a lot of conversations I had with my sponsor early on seemed really casual, and he wasn't really asking me a lot of probing questions, but like part of it was kind of just letting me get there, like letting me figure out where it started for me. And that was really had a really graceful, thoughtful sponsor early on, and it was really good.
yeah, I'm fortunate for my sponsor too. And it's funny, like when I was in rehab, which was, based in Nashville in the South where things are a bit slower and
Yeah.
not as hectic as New York, like the counselors are like, is New York going to be a fucking landmine for you? Like, because obviously it's New York City, it's nightlife is king here, drugs are king,
Mhm.
getting fucked up is part of the New York experience, 100%. But I've found that it's one of the best places to be in recovery. It's funny, once you turn this corner of getting sober, and I'm sure you can relate, is like when you're at a gig and you're in your heaviest of use and you're like, yeah, man, everybody here is as messed up as I am. But then
Mhm.
like you slowly realize like, no, it's just you and maybe a couple of your friends, Most of the world kind of just gets by on like they're okay, they can moderate. And a lot of people aren't drunk at all. And I find
Mhm.
that a lot of people here are sober. There's so many resources to stay sober here.
There's some solid sobriety in New York City, man. I've been to some amazing meetings there.
Yeah, absolutely. There's meetings around the clock here. If you want to go to a meeting at 3 a.m, which I've done, like when I'm waking out, there's a meeting you can go to in Manhattan at 3 a.m, for people who are just like, hey, it's the middle of the night, and I really want to use, and I need to go somewhere right now, so I don't. And there's like amazing people in there, and I'm meeting all sorts of great people. I'm helping people out, the best I can. I'm doing service work. I drive people to meetings. People who have less time than me, I'm happy to sit down with them and talk. I don't have all the answers, but I remember what it was like when I was a week into sobriety, so I'm happy to talk about that. Anything I can do to help right now, keep me busy.
I got to tell you about a meeting I stumbled into on the road one time. I was on a tour, and we had a day off, and somewhere just outside the city, a little bit upstate, and I just checked the directory. If you're not a sober person, you don't know this, but there's an 800 number, but there's also a huge online presence, and you can put in your zip code and find a meeting anywhere. But I didn't know when I went to this meeting that I was going to the 9/11 responders meeting. There were all these guys. It was kind of their home group. It was all these guys who were trauma survivors from digging through the rubble at 9/11. Many of them developed chronic illnesses, and also just had lingering PTSD and started self-medicating with booze and pills, and eventually got sober. And I found my way to their group. And man, you want to talk about a gratitude moment sitting in that meeting. Like, I'm so glad I never had to dig through the ashes of a skyscraper looking for my buddies. Like,
exactly, man. Yeah, there's so many things to keep you grounded in there. And the amount of people you meet who have just different walks of life and can give you some perspective on the fucking world.
Yeah.
And it's funny, like in rehab, I met people who I'd call my best friends right now. There's a few people I keep in contact with every day, like real fucking friends who have my back, You
get that mask yanked off in rehab, and you're so vulnerable. And then someone's like, hey, Ryley, I still think you're fucking cool. I like you. That's a huge part of getting better, is to have someone see you at your worst and be like, I still think you're a good person, man.
Yeah, and the people I met in rehab are probably some of the first people who ever met the real me that wasn't wearing that mask, who's like always in this character of having to be fucked up or lying or putting on a front, putting on a bullshit show. I'm a big bullshitter, A lot of addicts are. I've always been a bullshitter. I always make shit up. I lie, I cheat, I steal, you name it, And these are the first people who met me at my most vulnerable. So they're the people I've connected to first in this sort of new life I found. So I have a huge bond with them, and they're helping me, stay sober every day, and we talk all the time. I'm really grateful for the amount of support I have, and being sober has opened my eyes a lot to the support that was there before I got sober, and the people who have always been with me throughout this whole process, sticking it out with me, and the amount of love I have is great. And it's not just for me getting sober, it's, for all the people who have had my back since the start.
Yeah. Well, man, I wind these interviews up with a series of 8 questions that I've been sort of working on. Like, they've changed a little bit over time, but there, I always loved the way that the Inside the Actors Studio ended. And those questions were created by this French radio host named Bernard Pivot. And I thought I'd do my own version of that, because everybody kind of has a general idea of how they would answer those questions if they're asked. So I was looking for something fresh. But if you're cool with that, we can jump into that.
Sure.
All right. First question. What's the fondest memory you have of a meal that you've had?
Fondest memory of a meal? Oh, man. Best meal I ever had was, this sounds stupid, but first tour I went on, we dumpster dived Little Caesars. We hadn't eaten in 2 days because we were so broke, and I remember how good this dumpster dive, Little Caesars pizza, outside of somewhere outside of Phoenix, like in a suburb. We hadn't eaten in 2 days. We said, there's Little Caesars. Let's dumpster dive those pizzas. And I remember this bonding experience I had with the people I was on tour with. Like, we were all just smiling and like, finally, we got some food. Even.
Yeah. You know that expression, hunger is the best sauce, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So as gross as that is, I really look back on that with a lot of like joy, because I remember how much we were struggling and being like, this is awesome. We beat the system. We didn't pay a dime for these 10 pizzas. We just dumpster dive.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. There's no wrong answer to this question, but I want people to be real about it. Like, you know, a couple of people have been like, "Oh yeah, we went to Le Cirque or something," and I'm like, "Oh yeah, that sounds great." I'll never do that, but there's a strong possibility at some point that I may like eat a free pizza that maybe came out of a garbage receptacle. Yeah. I mean, yeah. So when I first started asking this question, I would ask people, "What's the most frightened you've ever been?"
Sure.
I say, because, you know, you ask a woman that question, you might bring up some serious trauma. And I'm into, you know, so I sort of offer that question, or its corollary. Tell me about a time that you were braver than you ever thought you could be.
Braver than I ever thought I could be also goes in with a time where I got my ass kicked. So it's a bit of a funny anecdote and sad anecdote. It involves my drug use. I was walking around Italy, in a city in Italy, looking for coke one night when I was just like having the cold sweats and fiending, you know, I was like withdrawing. And I asked these sort of dudes in an alley, I'm like, "Hey, where can I get some coke?" And I paid them like, I don't know, €100. They said they gave me a bag. I opened it up. It was empty. And I was drunk too. You know, I'm like, this is fucking fake. And so I pushed one of them, and I thought I was brave, and they all kicked my fucking ass. I got my ass beat.
Yeah.
So that's the bravest and the most terrified I've ever been, was when these group of 6 foot tall dudes, Italian dudes, punched my lights out.
Oh God. You know, one of the tours I was on, there was a musician who I was trying to figure out how to tell the story without violating his anonymity. He would press heroin into the backs of those like little pyramid shaped studs you see on like metal dudes belts. Like
yeah.
He would press dope into those things and then walk through customs with that. And he had other ways of concealing stuff, but his instrument was distinctive enough that if I tell you the rest of that story, I'm going to violate his anonymity. But
oh wow.
And he would think this will get me through the tour. And then by day 5, he was like scouring. I think he had a similar experience to yours in Slovenia and got his ass beat in an alley, demanding drugs.
Yeah, Southern and Eastern Europe, no joke when you're buying drugs.
Yeah. This is the third question. What is the thing in your life that you lost that you regret losing the most?
Thing I lost. Maybe it sounds like an overgeneralization, but just time. You know, I'm going throughout this process, learning to not have any regrets and accept my past and move on. But I lost a lot of time. I lost a lot of relationships and hurt a lot of people along the way from kind of being selfish and egotistical. I wish I had been more honest, and I wish I had opened myself up to more people rather than close myself off. I lost a lot of time, a lot of people.
One of the things in my sobriety that I've had to tackle as a regret was that I spent so many years on the road, not present for the experience of being on the road. Like,
exactly.
You spend your whole life getting good at this thing so that you can go do stuff. You can be in Spain, or you can like see the Rockies, and then you get there and you're just not present for it, which is bullshit. But I mean, you're young enough, you know, and I'm playing more music now than I've played since I was in my 20s.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm looking forward to in sobriety, is being able to experience this sort of travel. Because, you know, the travel is great for a long time, but I think especially in the last few years, you know, people are always like, what's it like to be in Paris? I'm like, I don't know. I play the show, and then I snort coke with a fan, and then I get fucked up and pass out in a shitty hotel. Like, you know, I haven't really experienced the joy and the natural highs that can bring. And it's so easy to become jaded being a touring musician. You know, people save up their whole lives to spend a week in Paris and see the Louvre or the Eiffel Tower, but I've like just been drunk by it and like maybe pissed in a bush by the Eiffel Tower, not giving a shit, you know?
Yeah. On the other side of that, travel can still be fairly grueling. I mean, I'm going to finish this interview and I'm going to get in a van with really no air conditioning to speak of and drive to Texas. But there's a part of that, at least I'm not sitting at a desk in an office. I mean, it's Monday morning. I could have been somewhere like looking at spreadsheets and hating my life. So,
yeah, well, that's what they say. Like, playing music is fun, but the real job is traveling. We travel for a living.
Yeah, I mean, you drive for 8 hours and play 45 minutes. So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's what most people don't get about touring, I guess, on the outside of the biz is like, yeah, touring's great, but, sit next to the same people in a van for a month straight, you're going to start to go nutty.
Can you tell me more about your bass player that used a bag of bread for a pillow for an entire tour?
Oh, yeah, that was early on, and that goes with dumpster diving, too. We had to sleep in the van all the time, or it was too hot out. We'd just sleep. We had a tent because sometimes you couldn't find a place to crash, so he just had a bunch of bread that he had dumpster dived and used that as a mattress and a pillow to lay down on. It was amazing. It was kind of a genius.
I mean, it is kind of genius. It's also not the kind of thing you tell your kids,
Absolutely.
What's your favorite place to gig?
Favorite place to gig? Again, I've been everywhere. I'm really lucky. I love being in Japan and Australia and all over Europe, but my favorite place to play is I like anywhere in San Francisco Bay Area. There's something about it that just draws me to it. I never lived there or anything, but I have a lot of support, a great community in San Francisco, and I think that's my favorite place to play. I'm just really attached to that city.
There's a big culture of the acoustic guitar there.
Oh, absolutely.
It's just a level of the sort of John Fahey obsessives all seem to live around there now.
Yeah, the whole Berkeley School of Music is huge out there. So yeah, the Bay Area, I love it so much.
Yeah, me too. So with that in mind, visa considerations and income limitations aside, if you could live anywhere in the world, where would you live?
I really mean it. I'm really happy here in New York City. I love it here. I don't want to be anywhere else.
You're not the first person I've interviewed who said, I love living here in New York and this is just where I want to be.
Yeah, I'm a big city person, and it's not saying anything patriotic or nationalistic, but I like America. I like where I'm from. This is my home. This is what I know. I love traveling the world and seeing all sorts of places, but I like the way the shit in America runs and stuff. I like how it works here, and I love New York City so much. I love big stinky cities where everything's happening all the time, and New York's for that.
I love Queens, especially. I have friends in Woodside. And
yeah, man. It's so wonderful up here. I don't know, and that just goes with everything. The food, the cold. Everybody's here, man.
Yeah.
I like all sorts of people all the time. I fucking love it here. And New York's the capital in the world for that. Just all different walks of life together on a fucking swamp.
Yeah, I think the past few years, there's been this temptation to sort of like James Baldwin yourself in America and be like, I'm done. I'm gonna get the fuck out, because certainly the political and social climate in this country the last few years has shown us that there is a huge streak of intolerance and inequality in this country. But I don't think that negates a lot of the things that make it a really, really good place to live and be from. And I mean, especially, Queens is magic. Take the train up to Flushing and check out the Chinese food. Just that alone is enough of a reason to take a vacation there.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I feel really great to be here at this part of my life. I can't imagine being anywhere else.
Yeah. Tell me about a time you received an act of kindness from a stranger.
Act of kindness from a stranger. Act of kindness from a stranger. I got a good one, actually. I remember being in Marfa, Texas on tour. And
well, what the fuck is going on in Marfa? I don't mean to interrupt, but there's a Prada store in Marfa.
Oh, it's just like a little town in West Texas that's been co-opted by artists from LA and New York. It's very in vogue. It's a cool city. There's like a cool community there of artists and stuff. Yeah, it's an old like ranching town that's, I think some artists from the Lower East Side of Manhattan moved to in the 80s and kind of just built a community there of, kind of a getaway. And
I gotta dig into this. I don't it's just baffling to me that like you would leave New York as an artist and go to West Texas. It just seems counterintuitive, but maybe that's the point.
Yeah, it's just a getaway. It's completely foreign to anything anybody on the coast knows. The middle of Texas, where the nearest big city is 3.5 hours away, El Paso. It's just kind of a getaway, I guess. And it is fun, being there. There's like all sorts of great programming and stuff. Yeah,
You're in Marfa.
Store, and I was busking at the time because we had to busk for money, gas, and a stranger gave me $100 and took me out to dinner and gave me a bunch of their old Grateful Dead tapes to listen to in the van. And I forget this person's name. This is probably 10 years ago now. But I remember being like, I used to tour when I was your age, but I'm just trying to give back because I remember somebody else set me up with dinner when I was busking on the street. And I thought that was amazing, this sort of act of kindness for a stinky hippie on the street, and it was really, really heartwarming for them to open themselves up to me like that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Paying it forward. That's great.
Exactly.
Are you a Dead fan?
Not as much as a lot of my friends, but I really do enjoy the Dead. Yeah, I can't say I'm a connoisseur of any sort.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess there's a level of obsessiveness that you're afraid to say, yes, I'm a Dead fan, because you don't know what happened in the last 17 minutes of Dark Star at the Haight-Ashbury and show in 1981 or whatever. Like, I don't claim that level of fandom of anything. But
exactly. Yeah.
But those dudes are out there.
Yeah, I didn't grow up like a hippie or anything. I kind of came into all that stuff sort of in my late teens and early 20s, so I'm still learning.
So do you have a perfect musical instrument, and do you own it?
Perfect musical instrument? No, I do not. I have an acoustic guitar, this old Guild.
I've seen it.
Yeah, Guild D35. I really like that. I like
nice and boomy.
Very nice and boomy. Great for recording. It's a beautiful guitar. I like it because of its imperfections. It's slightly atonal in the tuning. It needs a little neck reset, I think. But I think it's always kind of been by my side. It's just really trusty. It's not perfect at all. It's really wacky. It's all beat up and stuff. But it's kind of just a road dog guitar, and it's kind of been with me. I don't mean to personify a guitar like B.B. King or anything. It doesn't have a name or anything, but I just love it to death, and it always it gets me out of a lot of shit. It's been by me the whole time.
Yeah. I mean, it would be the end of the world if you named it. I mean, I don't have any named instruments, but like I've had several people explain to me that this instrument that they own has got a special spiritual significance, and then they say, well, so I named it after my great aunt who always looked after me or something. And I'm like, I can't argue with that.
Exactly. It's always nice to bring something like that back in. Yeah.
This is the last question, and I'm sort of working on the perfect formulation for it because it's a little airy-fairy, but I want you to imagine a taxi that can go anywhere in time or space. It's not sort of constricted by geography or linear time as we understand it. And you get into this taxi and you say, hey, man, to the driver, take me home. Where's that taxi going to take you?
Take me to the Lower East Side of New York in 1976. So I can see television start. I could see all my favorite music start. I could be omnipresent in my favorite era of American culture.
I think it's Richard Lloyd. He gives lessons. You could he's right there. I mean, he's probably a 20-minute subway ride from you at this point.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe that taxi can be sort of reality with a little more forehead lines and wrinkles, mind you. But
right.
But, yeah.
A friend of mine went for some lessons with him for a while, and I mean, just like first lesson, he sat down and like in the first 10 minutes made him look at the fretboard in a completely different way and changed his outlook on soloing, and it was like, this is so worth it. But you know, he's an erratic dude. He can be kind of unpredictable.
I bet, man. Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge fan of all that sort of stuff.
I was listening to an interview with Steve Albini that somebody recommended to me once, and Steve pointed out that the amount of time that passed between Woodstock and the explosion of music out of CBGBs was only 7 or 8 years.
Yeah, right. What the fuck?
Right. I mean, like, Kurt Cobain has been dead nearly 3 times that long, and we haven't had that kind of quantum leap in art. Or maybe we haven't. I'm just blind to it as a middle-aged white dude. Like, maybe there's something happening in trap or EDM that I'm just not on top of that's changing the world. But it does sometimes feel like we've just been sort of stuck in this weird repeating simulation since about 1996.
Yeah, man, absolutely. It seems like we're on repeat right now. But again, I might be ignorant and getting older.
Yeah. I mean, I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. I know that those first few months of sobriety are a real fucking cauldron emotionally, and there's a lot going on. And so to sort of be brave enough to sit down and talk about it is not insignificant.
Yeah, man. Thanks for taking the time to listen, and I appreciate being on your podcast.
Oh, thank you.
My pleasure.
All right, that's my interview with Ryley Walker. Amazing guitar player, songwriter, really interesting guy, and I'm really grateful he was able to do this. I want to remind everybody that check out our social media pages. There'll be a link to a Spotify playlist that'll have some songs from Ryley, some songs from last week's guest, Thor Harris, some songs from other past guests and future guests. I'll have a little description of who everybody is and a blog entry on the Patreon page, but also on our Facebook page. Once again, I want to remind everybody, if you're struggling with depression and anxiety and thoughts of self-harm, you should call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255. I can't stress enough how important that organization has been to people that I know and people I care about. It's 24/7. It's free. It's confidential. 1-800-273-8255. Also, recently I've heard about the Trans Lifeline's peer support line. If you're a trans person struggling with anxiety, depression, dysphoria, if you need some help and a peer to talk to, 1-877-565-8860. That's about all I got this week. Thanks for listening. Thanks for your support. Thanks for helping us win that grant. What an extraordinary life I'm leading right now. I'm stunned every day. In the meantime, be kind to yourself. Be patient with yourself. Ask for help if you need it. Support live music. Go see your favorite band. And remember that loud guitars save lives.